Episode 57 CZ February 7, 2025 The CDC posts, and then deletes data on bird flu transmission. In Episode 57 CZ0 Introduction RAWSEP View 1 Substack letters from an American Heather Cox. Richardson February 7, 2025 The Republicans' vision of the nation never reflected reality and now under President Donald Trump, it is entirely made up. 2 United States Washington District of Columbia CDC posts, then deletes data on bird flu spread between cats and people. The data, which appeared fleetingly online on Wednesday, confirmed transmission, and 2 household scientists called on the agency to release the full report. 3 United States Washington D.C. District of Columbia federal workers and Trump incentives to quit, and the court's judge delays program offering federal workers incentives to quit. 4 United States Washington D.C. District of Columbia State Attorneys General to sue over the Musk access to government systems. Letitia James of New York and 12 others said that the so-called Department of Government Efficiency had revealed private information and was unlawful, unprecedented, and unacceptable. 5 United States Washington D.C. District of Columbia United States Senate Democrats hold the floor in overnight protest of Trump nominee Powerless to stop President Trump, or Russell T Vought, the nominee to lead the White House Budget Office. Democrats pulled an all-nighter to show their opposition. 6 United States Washington D.C. District of Columbia Trump administration Transportation Department RAWSEP View. The new head of the Transportation Department, Sean Duffy, has 9 children. The personal seems to have become political because transportation funds have been prioritized for high birth rate areas. From the article headline: Trump administration prioritizes high birth rate areas for transportation funds. Some policy experts said they were not sure how the move was connected to the overall transportation goals of the president. 7 United States Washington D.C. District of Columbia World Aid staff to be laid off. Trump administration to lay off nearly all of U.S. aid agency staff. 8 United States Washington D.C. District of Columbia RAWSEP View. Trump, in his own words, in real time and in real life IRL, briefly off the internet and before a bipartisan audience, but the words may be unreal because of the propensity of Trump to lie continuously. 9 United States Washington D.C. District of Columbia guest essay: This is how Democrats can counter Elon Musk. RAWSEP View. A tech sister reveres the tech bro Elon Musk, although she has worked for the Obama administration and now works teaching the next generation to write computer code to improve the world. Apparently, according to the writer, an attitude adjustment will solve all problems with the Musk overreach in attempting to fire tens of thousands of skilled government workers just doing their jobs. Her reputation will suffer if her coding accomplishment is rejected. 10 United States Washington D.C. District of Columbia The Trump crisis deepens. RAWSEP View. This article enumerates why Republicans should vote against Kash Patel for Federal Bureau of Investigation FBI Director. 11 United States Washington D.C. District of Columbia guest essay: Now will we believe what is happening right before our eyes? RAWSEP View. The conclusion of this essay is that Trump is lawless and we as ordinary citizens must somehow protect ourselves against him. 12 United States Washington D.C. District of Columbia right-wing group publishes DI watch list targeting federal workers. The American Accountability Foundation list included names and photos of more than 50 people, many in programs aimed at improving the health of people of color. RAWSEP View. The Centers for Disease Control CDC and the National Institutes of Health NIH are where the majority of the employees on the list work. One of the few white people on the list worked at the Environmental Defense Fund prior to his present government job at the National Academy of Medicine. 13 California Lake Berryessa. Days of heavy rain turns California lake into a quirky tourist spot for the first time in 6 years. Water is gushing through a unique spillway in Lake Berryessa just north of San Francisco. 14 California Los Angeles Kamala Harris tours the destruction in the Palisades. Asked during her visit on Thursday if she was considering running for governor of California, Ms. Harris did not give a direct answer but did not rule it out either. RAWSEP View. Now here is real hope. 15 California San Francisco Pacific Heights. When a pro-Trump crypto king came knocking, San Francisco elites locked the door. A pioneer of Bitcoin was rejected for an apartment purchased by the residents of the building after he was in escrow. The sellers, including a powerful Democrats, say they do not care about his politics. RAWSEP View. An example of red discontent in the midst of the blue state of California. 16 New York. A judge tried to get out of jury duty. What he said cost him his job. Richard Snyder, a town justice in upstate New York, said he could not serve as an impartial grand juror because he believed anyone appearing before him was guilty. RAWSEP View. Like Trump, this lay judge does not have a law degree. Perhaps like Trump, he cannot grasp legal concepts he has not been taught, such as the concept of innocent until proven guilty, or perhaps he did not get a law degree because, among other things such as the expense, time, and effort of obtaining a degree, he just does not like the very democratic and hopeful and sometimes arduous road he would need to follow to adhere to the concept of innocent until proven guilty as a judge in a court of law. 17 Pennsylvania 10000. 0 eggs are stolen in Pennsylvania amid shortage. The theft of the eggs, which the authorities said were worth $40,000, comes as grocery shoppers across the country are facing empty shelves and higher prices for eggs. RAWSEP View. There is the problem of the cost of eggs. There is also the problem of the reason for the scarcity of eggs because of bird flu culling of hen flocks. 18 Wyoming. Why coal has been so hard to quit in the U.S. What the economics of coal-rich states like Wyoming tells us about the transition away from the dirtiest fossil fuel. RAWSEP View. The point of making videos for residents against wood smoke emission particulates is to further the progress towards stopping the unnecessary use of indoor residential wood burning for home heating. There is a slightly better alternative to wood burning, which is coal burning. Wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 and CO2 as coal burning, but neither solid fuel burning should continue for the sake of human health and for the sake of slowing climate change. The specious arguments for continuing coal burning may be similar to the specious arguments for continuing wood burning. The editor of RAWSEP attempts to point out similarities and differences shown in this following article. 19 Greenland and Switzerland. In Greenland, the ice does not just flow, it quivers and quakes by using a fiber optic cable to detect tiny vibrations a mile below the surface. Scientists discovered a surprising way that ice sheets move. RAWSEP View. This discovery helps explain why sea levels are rising, which is a byproduct of climate change. 20 European Union. The European Trump playbook offer carrots but warn that you have a big stick. The so-called Trump task force of the European Union spent 2024 preparing for a possible trade dispute. Specifics are secret but guiding principles are becoming clear. RAWSEP View. Some of the strategies for EU response to possible Trump tariffs are to target United States Republican states in retaliatory tariffs. 21 Israel. The Trump-Gaza deal war crimes in exchange for beachfront property. 22 Saudi Arabia. Trump met PGA Tour Commissioner about Saudi Golf League deal. Tour officials said the session at the White House brought us closer to a final deal that would be subject to Justice Department antitrust scrutiny. RAWSEP View. Perhaps Trump is envisioning LIV golf events in a Gaza that has been remade by a Riviera-style real estate deal. The name LIV refers to the Roman numerals for 54, the number of holes played at LIV events. LIV Golf is financed by the public investment fund, the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Saudi Arabia. Some journalists and commentators have said the tour is part of efforts by the Saudi monarchy, which has been criticized for its corruption and human rights abuses, to improve its public image through sports. One introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the eco-design wood stove, and international convention based on the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world. When calculating if each country has met its climate goals, this non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Burning wood instead of coal increases the adverse health effects of PM 2.5 air pollution and hastens climate change. Stopping burning wood for residential home heating is an easy, incremental way to be kind to your neighbor and to the planet. Choosing to burn wood when burning wood when it is more expensive than heating your home with a heat pump that is less expensive when you use the United States heat pump rebates available in 2025 in many states is like choosing a gas-powered car above an electric car when both are of equal price. Many of the Trump tariffs will result in less manufacture of clean electric vehicles in the United States and less price reduction to customers on existing electric vehicles. One Substack letters from an American excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Heather Cox, Richardson, February 7, 2025. The Republicans' vision of the nation never reflected reality, and now under President Donald Trump, it is entirely made up. Trump lied that Elon Musk found that the U.S. Agency for International Development USAID spent $100 million on condoms to Hamas, and the fatal Madare collision that took 67 lives was due to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Trump today claimed CBS defrauded the public in the greatest broadcasting scandal in history when it exercised normal editing procedures on a 60 Minutes interview with then Vice President Kamala Harris that he insisted falsely involved, replacing her actual answers with others. Today, Trump called for CBS News and 60 Minutes to be immediately terminated despite the fact that the U.S. Constitution protects the freedom of the press. MAGA is amplifying right-wing lies today. Influencers including Musk claimed that USAID secretly bankrolled Politico, claiming that the media site had taken $8 million from USAID. In fact, that sum was not an annual grant, but rather years of subscriptions from across the government to Politico Pro, a pricey subscription service for data and legislative analyses for lobbyists and government officials. When Representative Lauren Boebert, our CO, joined the chorus parroting the lie fact checkers, noted that her office is a subscriber. It paid $7,150 for a year-long subscription starting last January. Another story spreading disinformation appeared today after the State Department claimed that Panama had agreed to let U.S. government vessels transit the Panama Canal for free. The Panamanian president told reporters that the story was lies and falsehoods, and noted that he had told the U.S. Defense Secretary that he does not have the legal authority to waive transit fees for anyone. This morning at the National Prayer Breakfast, Trump boasted that he had delivered water to California, saying the water comes down from the northwest parts of Canada, I guess, but the Pacific Northwest. There are Trump supporters among California farmers. They reported today that the 2 billion gallons of water Trump dumped onto the ground last week was water for irrigation that could never make it to the Los Angeles fires. For now, the farmers called for close coordination over the incredibly complex California water system. In 2017, before taking office, Trump told top aides to think of each presidential day as an episode in a television show in which he vanquishes rivals. Performative victories over the libs make MAGA voters happy. The current administration actions strengthen the hand of foreign nations, especially China, against the U.S. Yesterday, Pam Bondi, Trump Attorney General, took the oath of office. Today, Bondi disbanded the Federal Bureau of Investigation Foreign Influence Task Force (FIDF) and cut back enforcement of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. FARA, then director of the FBI Christopher Wray, established FIDF in 2017 to stop countries like Russia and China from interfering with American politics, as Russia had done in 2016 to help elect Trump. FARA required anyone accepting money from a foreign government to declare that connection, and was key in helping law enforcement agencies to dismantle foreign influence operations. The Trump 2016 campaign manager Paul Manafort, for Example pleaded guilty to violating FARA when he did not disclose that he was being paid by those linked to the Russian government in December 2020. Before he left office, Trump pardoned Manafort. The Justice Department under Bondi is scaling back white-collar crimes like bribery of foreign officials, kleptocracy, and money laundering. In the past few years, the Justice Department has recovered yachts, planes, and real estate from Russian sanctioned because of the attack on Ukraine. Taken together, these changes are an invitation to foreign actors to interfere in American affairs. Even worse, it is an invitation to Americans to help them do it. The destruction of USAID will take billions of dollars from American farmers. Authoritarian leaders, including Russia, Hungary, and El Salvador, are cheering on the Musk boast that he was feeding USAID into the wood chipper. USAID funding was less than 1% of the U.S. budget and has monitored elections in Russia, documenting extensive voting irregularities therewith. The U.S. abandoning foreign aid. China can step in to fill the void. China will be able to step in at the G20 summit of the largest economies in the world to be held in November in Johannesburg, South Africa. Trump says he is unhappy that South Africa is confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. Trump ally Elon Musk hails from South Africa and has agreed that white South Africans are being persecuted for their race in their home country. South Africa has also refused official approval of the Musk Starlink satellite system because of a state requirement that 30% of a company must be owned locally, a requirement SpaceX has criticized in the policies of the administration currently in power. There are also advantages to favored corporations. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy posted today that the Doge team is going to plug in to help upgrade our aviation system, saying that experienced Washington bureaucrats are the reason U.S. infrastructure is crumbling. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton pointed out that U.S. airlines had gone 16 years without fatal crashes. Then MAGA fired the FAA chief, gutted the Aviation Security Advisory Committee, and threatened air traffic controllers with layoffs. Now there have been 2 fatal crashes. Hope your unvetted 22-year-olds fix things fast. Critics of the idea of Musk taking over the U.S. air traffic control systems note that his Tesla electric vehicles have the highest fatal accident rate among all car brands in America. The average fatal crash rate is 28 per billion vehicle miles driven. Tesla has a rate of 56 per billion miles driven. The January 16th explosion of a SpaceX rocket over the Caribbean that scattered debris over the region led the Federal Aviation Administration to lock down airspace over Turks and Caicos. Last night, Senate Democrats filibustered for 30 hours in an attempt to convince Republicans to join them in rejecting Trump nominee for director of the Office of Management and Budget Russell T Vought, a key author of Project 2025 in the House. Democrats introduced the Taxpayer Data Protection Act to stop Musk and Doge from accessing personal financial data. 2 United States Washington District of Columbia CDC posts, then deletes data on bird flu spread between cats and people. The data, which appeared fleetingly online on Wednesday, confirmed transmission in 2 household. Scientists called on the agency to release the full report. RAWSEP View, the editor of RAWSEP, would prefer to focus exclusively on the threat to human health of indoor residential wood burning, but relevant issues intrude. Bird flu may become airborne just as COVID-19 is airborne, and the PM 2.5 pollution from indoor residential wood burning is airborne. Preventive measures should be taken for airborne illnesses present now and which will be present in the future. COVID-19 illness and deaths must be prevented by new vaccines developed every year. Bird flu must be prevented by the most up-to-date preventive measures possible, which are usually developed with help of the United States government. That government involvement is threatened by the anti-science and anti-medicine view of the current United States president and his associates by the current acting head of the CDC appointed by Trump. The editor of RAWSEP suspects that a Trump directive resulted in the current United States Centers for Disease Control CDC posting and then deleting data on the bird flu spread between cats and people referenced in the headline above from the article. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, New York Times, February 6, 2025. Cats that became infected with bird flu might have spread the virus to humans in the same household and vice versa, according to data that briefly appeared online in a report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, but then abruptly vanished. The data appear to have been mistakenly posted, but includes crucial information about the risks of bird flu to people and pets in one household. An infected cat might have spread the virus to another cat and to a human adolescent. The cat died 4 days after symptoms began in a second household. An infected dairy farm worker appears to have been the first to show symptoms, and a cat then became ill 2 days later and died on the 3rd day. The table was the lone mention of bird flu in a scientific report published on Wednesday that was otherwise devoted to air quality and the Los Angeles County wildfires. The virus, called H5N1, is primarily adapted to birds, but it has been circulating in dairy cattle since early last year. H5N1 has also infected at least 67 Americans, but does not yet have the ability to spread readily among people. Only 1 American in Louisiana has died of an H5N1 infection. So far, the report was part of the prestigious Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report of the CDC, which until 2 weeks ago had regularly published every week since the first installment decades ago, but a communications ban on the agency had held the reports back until the wildfire report was published on Wednesday. Experts said that the finding that cats might have passed the virus to people was not entirely unexpected, but they were alarmed that the finding had not yet been released to the public. If there is new evidence about H5N1 that has been held up for political purposes, that is just completely at odds with what the government responsibility is, which is to protect the American people, said the director of the Pandemic Center at a school of public health. It was important that the CDC immediately published the full data and the context in which they were collected for other scientists to review. She said scientists have long known that cats are highly susceptible to the virus. At least 85 domestic cats have been infected since late 2022, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, but there had not previously been any documented cases of cats passing the virus to people. Given the number of cats in the U.S. and the close contact with people, there is definitely a need to understand the potential risk, said a veterinarian and virologist. Although cats may be infected when they prey on infected wild birds, cases among domestic cats in the United States began rising last year as the virus spread through dairy farms. On many farms, dead cats were the first signal that cows had been infected. Several recent cases in pet cats have also been linked to contaminated raw pet food or raw milk. H5N1 is often fatal in cats, which may develop severe neurological symptoms. Historically, H5N1 has primarily affected birds, but over the last several years, new versions of the virus have proved capable of infecting a wide range of mammals, including wild and domestic cats, seals, and dairy cows. Infections in mammals give the virus more opportunities to evolve in ways that could allow it to infect humans more easily. 3 United States Washington, D.C. District of Columbia federal workers and Trump incentives to quit, and the court's judge delays program offering federal workers incentives to quit. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, January 7, 2025. Where things stand, judge delays resignation plan. A federal judge in Massachusetts has stopped, at least temporarily, the Trump effort to get federal employees to leave their jobs by accepting delayed resignation offers. The judge said the government could not move forward with the program, which gave workers until 11:59 p.m. to accept offers to stop working and collect pay until September, pending a hearing Monday afternoon on a legal challenge. The administration said Thursday that more than 40,000 workers had already accepted. A federal judge in Massachusetts barred the Trump administration on Thursday from imposing a midnight deadline on federal workers who were offered the chance to take a deferred resignation, pausing the initiative until a hearing on Monday afternoon. The offer, which had been set to expire at 11:59 p.m. on Thursday, is part of a sweeping effort by President Trump and the billionaire Elon Musk to drastically cut the size of the federal government. Judge George A. O'Toole Jr. stopped the Office of Personnel Management from carrying out the program, which had been detailed in an email sent to roughly 2 million federal workers last week until a hearing scheduled for Monday afternoon. The fork in the road plan offered federal workers the chance to resign and be paid through the end of September. Labor unions had challenged the legality of the program and urged employees not to accept the offer. I enjoin the defendants from taking action to implement the so-called fork directive, pending the completion of briefing and oral argument on the issues. The judge said it remains unclear how the pause will affect tens of thousands of federal employees who had already signed up to resign through the program, but Judge O'Toole instructed lawyers representing the government to rapidly contact all employees who had received the offer, updating them about the pause. Terms of the buyout plan, including draft contracts, have been distributed to employees throughout an array of agencies this week. Staff across the Departments of Education and Labor were briefed earlier in the week about the buyout, and employees in the CIA who were previously exempted, along with other national security-related agencies, were also told on Tuesday that they had become eligible to participate. Hundreds of employees at other agencies, including the Environmental Protection Agency, who are working on probationary status or had been put on administrative leave for helping administer diversity programs, were told they could be fired imminently, causing many to weigh whether they would be best served by accepting the buyout. But the vague conditions and uncertain legality of the offer also led to considerable consternation as employees struggled to understand what protections it actually afforded. Employees at the Education Department were told explicitly on Wednesday that even if they accepted the agreement, they were shown they could still be fired on Friday after having already waived any rights to sue or recover the 7 months of salaries promised. On Thursday morning, employees at the General Services Administration were still navigating conflicting information while bracing for the midnight deadline. While some GSA workers got word that the deadline to confirm their resignations had been moved up to noon, others received various emails about the impending deadline. Early on Thursday morning, employees at various federal agencies received an email from the Office of Personnel Management reminding them about the upcoming deadline. There will not be an extension of this program. The email read: 3 government unions, the American Federation of Government Employees, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, and the National Association of Government Employees, and the liberal nonprofit group Democracy Forward, had sued to block the deferred resignation plan, which they called legally unsound. A representative of the American Federation of Government Employees, the largest union of federal employees, said in a statement, "We continue to believe this program violates the law, and we will continue to aggressively defend the rights of our members." Judge O'Toole told lawyers for both sides to prepare to argue the case on its merits on Monday at 2 p.m. A hearing that could determine the status of the program. 4 United States Washington, D.C. District of Columbia State Attorney Generals versus Elon Musk. State Attorneys General to sue over the Musk access to government systems. Letitia James of New York and 12 others said that the so-called Department of Government Efficiency had revealed private information and was unlawful, unprecedented, and unacceptable. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. Letitia James of New York and 12 other state attorneys general said Thursday that they would sue over a cost-cutting initiative that had afforded young aides to Elon Musk broad access to the most fundamental computer systems of the federal government. The Trump administration calls the program the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, though it is merely a unit within the executive branch, and its work has shaken Washington as its workers demand access to vast networks of sensitive information. The ability to access that information by Musk and his staff, including bank account and social security data, is unlawful, the attorneys general said in a news release. The president does not have the power to give away our private information to anyone he chooses, and he cannot cut federal payments approved by Congress. The statement said this level of access for unauthorized individuals is unlawful, unprecedented, and unacceptable. Since Trump took office, Musk and his staff of young engineers have taken over the United States Digital Service, now renamed United States DOGE Service, which was established in 2014 to fix the online services of the federal government. They have also gained access to the payment system of the Treasury Department following a standoff with top civil service officials. Their access to the system has been closely held in the past because of the sensitivity of the information it holds, including social security checks, tax refunds, and other payments from the federal government. When the move on Thursday was made in concert with the attorneys general of Arizona, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, Nevada, Rhode Island, Vermont. It is the most recent effort of Ms. James to counteract parts of the Trump sweeping agenda. 5 United States Washington, D.C. District of Columbia, United States Senate Democrats hold the floor in overnight protest of Trump nominee Powerless to stop President Trump, or Russell T Vought, the nominee to lead the White House Budget Office. Democrats pulled an all-nighter to show their opposition. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. There was no nursery rhyme reciting nor phone book reading, no cots wheeled out for senators to catch naps in between speechifying, but one by one on Wednesday night and into Thursday, Senate Democrats flocked to the floor for an all-night talkathon to protest the confirmation of Russell T Vought, President, the Trump nominee, to lead the White House Budget Office and an architect of his ultra-conservative Project 2025 policy agenda. Several senators swigged caffeinated beverages. One arrived straight from a black tie Bank with the eyes were bleary, but the outrage was fierce as Democrats took turns railing against Vought, who has orchestrated many of the Trump moves to go around Congress to dismantle and defund the federal government. They had no hope of stopping Vought, consigned to. The minority Democrats lacked the votes to block him or any other Trump nominee so long as Republicans continued to largely hold together in support. Still, the all-nighter was a chance for members of a party that is under intense pressure from its base to push back more strongly against Trump, to at least try to show they were trying. The all-night session was an attempt by Senate Democrats to show they were trying to push back against President Trump. The session was not an actual old school filibuster. A change in Senate rules a dozen years ago did away with filibusters for presidential nominees. Earlier on Wednesday, senators voted along party lines 53-47 to advance the nomination of Vought. The Senate was expected to vote later Thursday to confirm him, most likely in another party line move, and yet Democrats lined up for their late night and early morning speaking slots to telegraph the intensity of their opposition. Our constituents, our country, and our Constitution are under attack by Donald Trump and Russell Vought. Democrats are fighting back. 6 United States, Washington, D.C. District of Columbia, Trump Administration, Transportation Department, RAWSEP View. The new head of the Transportation Department, Sean Duffy, has 9 children. The personal seems to have become political because transportation funds have been prioritized for high birth rate areas. From the article headline, Trump Administration prioritizes high birth rate areas for transportation funds. Some policy experts said they were not sure how the move was connected to the overall transportation goals of the president. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. The day after Sean Duffy was confirmed as president, the Trump Transportation Secretary, he signed a memo dictating how federal transportation funds should be allocated. The list of new criteria included one directive that stood out: all grant and loan programs of the department should prioritize projects in communities with marriage and birth rates higher than the national average. To the extent allowed by law, it is not unusual for new administrations to apply different standards to funds that their agencies hand out, but some advocacy groups and policy experts said they found the move puzzling and were unsure how it connected to the overall transportation goals of the Trump administration. In a statement, the Transportation Department said the order would help advance the Trump agenda to support economic development and strengthen American families by focusing on real measurable benefits rather than ideological considerations. The department did not respond to requests for further comment. Some conservatives, including Elon Musk and Vice President J.D. Vance, have fixated on the declining birth rate in America, viewing it as catastrophic for the national economy as retired people start to outnumber younger workers and reflective of eroding family values. But it remains unclear how directing more transportation funding to areas with higher birth and marriage rates would reverse the trend. It is hard to know what sort of transportation policy would promote fertility or marriage, said the director of the Center on Opportunity and Social Mobility at the conservative American Enterprise Institute. You could imagine that someone might think if we had more bike lanes, people might have more kids, but there is just not good evidence that any of that is going to be effective. Prioritizing areas with higher birth rates would, however, send more federal funding to Republican states. South Dakota, Alaska, Nebraska, North Dakota, and Texas are among the states with the highest fertility rates, according to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. States that have the lowest fertility rates include Vermont, Oregon, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire, none of which voted for Trump in the 2024 election. Clearly, this is helping red states. Marriage rates are less correlated with partisan-leaning. States with the highest marriage rates include Nevada and Hawaii, which fall on opposite sides of the partisan divide, although red states like Montana, Utah, and Arkansas also top the list according to CDC data. This policy will reorient transportation dollars to lower density communities where there are more single-family homes. Family life is often more affordable and family formation is higher. We do not know if this aligns at all with the places most in need of federal support. The Transportation Department was authorized roughly $600 billion as part of a 2021 bipartisan infrastructure bill, which President Joseph R. Biden Jr. signed into law. The bulk of those funds is directly distributed to states, but the department was also given billions of dollars to dole out as competitive grants. The priorities of the Biden administration included making transportation infrastructure more resilient to climate change, investing in disadvantaged neighborhoods, and increasing safety for pedestrians and cyclists, as well as drivers. For instance, the administration rolled out a $4 billion program that sought to reconnect communities of color that had been split by highways. The Duffy memo will likely reorient the allocation of funds to different places and for different purposes. It also criticized the use of the social cost of carbon, a metric that quantifies the damage from climate change caused by fossil fuel emissions when considering where to invest, and required the use of cost-benefit analysis, which may minimize concerns around environmental impact and racial equity. 7 United States, Washington, D.C. District of Columbia, World Aid staff to be laid off. Trump administration to lay off nearly all of the U.S. aid agency staff members. Officials for the agency were notified of the planned cuts on the same day. They learned that about 800 awards and contracts administered through USAID were being canceled. 3 people said RAWSEP View. The focus of these RAWSEP videos is individual countries, starting with the United States, where laws against air pollution caused by indoor residential wood burning should be passed. In the opinion of RAWSEP, the crisis in the United States government at this time has effects across the globe, and no story exemplifies this better than withdrawing funding for public health measures across the globe at this critical time. Bird flu could spread from any country to another. Existing health crises that need the aid of the United States are polio, hepatitis, and measles, etc., as well as continuing eruptions of COVID-19 illnesses and early deaths. From the article, excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. The Trump administration plans to reduce the number of workers at the U.S. Agency for International Development from more than 10,000 to about 290 positions. 3 people with knowledge of the plan said on Thursday. 8 United States, Washington, D.C. District of Columbia, RAWSEP View. Trump in his own words in real time and in real life IRL, briefly off the internet and before a bipartisan audience, but the words may be unreal because of the propensity of Trump to lie continuously. From the article headline, Trump pauses online tirade to preach unity at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington. Trump took a moment to speak of bipartisan comedy. Just hours earlier, he torched the federal bureaucracy, the global order The media and Democrats excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. Of all the many forms Donald J. Trump can take, maybe the most perplexing one is pious Trump. It is a shape he shifted into shortly after 8 a.m. on Thursday morning to deliver a sermon of sorts on Capitol Hill for the annual National Prayer Breakfast in the Grand Amphitheater of National Statuary. Hall members of Congress sat before him. There were leaders of the Republican Party. There were Democrats. Look at each other. He said they were a great group of people and beseeched them to come together. We have to make life better for everyone, he said. President Trump appealing to the better angels? This was somewhat amazing since the various other forms of Trump happened to be running around with flamethrowers earlier that morning, torching the federal bureaucracy, the global order, the media, the opposition party in the room, and even the messaging coming out of his own White House. Just before his arrival at the Capitol to preach unity, he had gone on a fiery posting spree. He demanded that CBS lose its broadcasting license. He trumpeted a baseless conspiracy theory that Democrats had stolen billions of dollars from the U.S. Agency for International Development to pay off media outlets for slanted coverage. Democrats cannot hide from this one, he wrote. Too big, too dirty. He described Senator Chuck Schumer, a New York Democrat, pejoratively as a Palestinian. Schumer had skipped the ceremony to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. Trump has taken office. He posts dark missives and ideas that rattle his staff at odd hours. He talks about retribution against his foes, shutting down the media, and invading allied nations. 9 United States, Washington, D.C. District of Columbia guest essay. This is how Democrats can counter Elon Musk. RAWSEP View. A tech sister reveres the tech bro Elon Musk, although she has worked for the Obama administration and now works teaching the next generation to write computer code to improve the world. Apparently, according to the writer, an attitude adjustment will solve all problems with the Musk overreach in attempting to fire tens of thousands of skilled government workers just doing their jobs. Her reputation will suffer if her coding accomplishment is rejected. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP. For brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 7, 2025. If anyone on the left should be rooting for Elon Musk, it is me. In 2011, the nonprofit I founded started bringing mostly young programmers and designers into government offices. We needed access to data systems to do our jobs, but many public servants were fearful that our teams might move fast and break things, so sometimes nothing moved at all. Later, I helped found the U.S. Digital Service in the White House under President Barack Obama. The tech talent that came in was a little older and more experienced, but the dynamic was the same. I have called for deproceduralization, a kind of deregulation, not of the private sector but of government itself, from the Pentagon to the Agriculture Department to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, so that it can move faster, be bolder, and get stuff done. I have come by my impatience, honestly. Now Musk is accused of many of the things I was criticized for, such as importing tech talent, impatience with the status quo, and a desire for disruption. He has even taken the U.S. Digital Service as his vehicle, renaming it the U.S. Doge Service after his so-called Department of Government Efficiency. Democrats should make repealing the Paperwork Reduction Act and other barriers like it, such as reforming the current hiring process, a cornerstone of their own deproceduralization agenda, and get off the defensive. Elon the Musk initiative appears to be one of the most effective waves of the flood the zone strategy. Anyone who cares about the core principles that our government is built on will need to protect civil servants who defend the law. If you are mad about what the Musk initiative is doing to the institution of government, it is time to go on the offense to reform it. 10 United States, Washington, D.C. District of Columbia. The Trump crisis deepens. RAWSEP View. This article enumerates why Republicans should vote against Kash Patel for Federal Bureau of Investigation FBI Director. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. It is a mistake to think of the first 2.5 weeks of President the Trump second term as a series of discrete and separate constitutional and legal crises. It is one crisis with many manifestations. So is Elon the Musk role in the federal government and the extraordinary effort to impound appropriated funds or destroy executive agencies established by Congress. And so is the Trump attempt to push the edges of his tariff authority and extend congressional trade statutes far beyond their intended scope. Even the low and spiteful character of so many people who are being hired in the administration is related to the Trump constitutional revolution. He needs people who are not just willing but also happy to blow through moral and legal guardrails for him. I could spend months playing columnist whack-a-mole with any number of unconstitutional, lawless, or immoral Trump initiatives. That individual analysis will be important. Every case will turn on different aspects of American law, but we cannot miss the forest for the trees. The founders knew that not every president would be George Washington, and they built in the ultimate check on presidential power, an independent branch of government that could override and even remove the president. I hope that Trump will do what he did for most of his first term and yield to a Supreme Court that rejected his legal arguments more than those of any other modern president. But hope is not a strategy when close allies of the president declare their intention to throw off precedents and legal paradigms. Kash Patel as FBI director is morally and professionally unfit, but it is worse than that. He is a vital cog in the Trump anti-constitutional machine. Republican senators should see this moment for what it is. It is an opportunity to demonstrate the courage necessary to uphold their constitutional role. Republican senators are heirs to a constitutional tradition that tells them they must exercise their own judgment. They should check the power of the president, especially a president of their own party. There is no case for Kash Patel. Every Republican senator who votes for Patel is abdicating his or her constitutional responsibility. And for what? To please a lame duck bully? To protect their right flank in a primary? It took immense courage to create our constitutional republic, and now immense cowardice is placing our system of justice under threat. 11 United States, Washington, D.C. District of Columbia guest essay. Now, will we believe what is happening right before our eyes? RAWSEP View. The conclusion of this essay is that Trump is lawless and we as ordinary citizens must somehow protect ourselves against him. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against would smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 7, 2025. They told us they would smash the institutions that safeguard our democracy, and that is exactly what they are doing. Many Americans chose not to believe what they were saying. Will we now believe what we are seeing? To be clear, they are not just Donald Trump and his billionaire co-pilot over the past half-century. An anti-democratic movement has coalesced in the United States. It draws on super wealthy funders, ideologues of the new right, purveyors of disinformation, and Christian nationalist activists. Though it pretends to revere the founders and the Constitution, it fundamentally rejects the idea of America as a modern, pluralistic democracy. The natural tendency in a functioning democracy is to look for ways to work across the aisle and agree to disagree, but appeasement now would be a mistake. This anti-democratic movement has no interest in compromise in normal times. It is the duty of democratic citizens to help a newly elected president succeed in the present circumstances. It is our duty to protect our democratic republic from a lawless president and the profoundly anti-American movement he leads. 12 United States Washington, D.C. District of Columbia right-wing group publishes DI watch list targeting federal workers. The American Accountability Foundation list included names and photos of more than 50 people, many in programs aimed at improving the health of people of color. RAWSEP View The Centers for Disease Control CDC and the National Institutes of Health NIH are where the majority of the employees on the list work. One of the few white people on the list worked at the Environmental Defense Fund prior to his present government job at the National Academy of Medicine. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 5, 2025. A conservative nonprofit has posted the names and photos of more than 50 federal workers on what it is calling a watch list related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, asking President Trump to fire them. The group says the workers named in its DI bureaucrat watch list supported diversity, criticized Trump on social media, or made donations to Democrats. Many of the targets are black workers at health agencies. The list was compiled by the American Accountability Foundation, a small right-wing nonprofit that was founded in 2020 to oppose Biden administration policies and nominees. Since the Trump election, the group has stepped up its targeting of specific federal workers, some of them career employees with little power that it believes oppose his agenda. The list included dossiers about individual staff members listing what it called their DI offenses. The CDC and NIH, who employed the majority of the people on the list, declined to comment on Wednesday. One of the few white people on the list is a physician and researcher who works on climate equity, an effort that recognizes people can be disproportionately impacted by climate disasters. That physician researcher, a member of the National Academy of Medicine, was singled out over prior employment at the Environmental Defense Fund, a group with a long history of opposing conservative policies. The executive director of the American Public Health Association called the list reprehensible. He said that the majority of the CDC employees on the list are African American and were targeted for having anything to do with trying to focus on underserved populations. Everybody is aghast at this. 13 California Lake Berryessa. Days of heavy rain turns California Lake into a quirky tourist spot for the first time in 6 years. Water is gushing through a unique spillway in Lake Berryessa, just north of San Francisco. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. Back-to-back atmospheric rivers have dumped buckets of rain across Northern California, just east of Napa Valley. For the first time since 2019, water began gushing furiously through a spillway in Lake Berryessa. The eye-catching event has happened only 3 other times in the past 20 years, and it has drawn curiosity seekers to the man-made reservoir 70 miles northeast of San Francisco. Lake Berryessa was created in 1958 after the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation built Monticello Dam and harnessed the waters of Puda Creek. The reservoir is in Napa County, but supplies waters to residents, businesses, and farmers in neighboring Solano County. The lake is also a popular spot for recreation. The spillway is expected to continue to be active through the weekend and likely for another week or two. 14 California Los Angeles. Kamala Harris tours the destruction in the Palisades. Asked during her visit on Thursday if she was considering running for governor of California, Ms. Harris did not give a direct answer, but did not rule it out either. RAWSEP View. Now here is real hope. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. Former Vice President Kamala Harris toured fire damage in Pacific Palisades on Thursday and met with local officials. Her first visit to the neighborhood since the devastating wildfires last month. In one of her few public appearances since leaving office, Ms. Harris walked down El Medio Avenue, an area hit hard by the Palisades fire, which burned more than 23,000 acres and destroyed more than 6,000 structures. Ms. Harris then walked down the street toward Asilomar View Park, which overlooks the remains of a mobile home park destroyed by the flames. You can smell the smoke that was here. Ms. Harris said you can feel the toxicity, frankly, of the environment. You can feel the energy of all of the folks who are still here on the ground doing the work of trying to make this area safe. Ms. Harris also visited the Westwood Recreation Center, which has served as an emergency shelter and relief center. Ms. Harris was asked by reporters whether she was considering running for governor of California. Ms. Harris did not give a direct answer, but did not rule out such a run. 15 California San Francisco Pacific Heights. When a pro-Trump crypto king came knocking, San Francisco elites locked the door. A pioneer of Bitcoin was rejected for an apartment purchase by the residents of the building after he was in escrow. The sellers, including a powerful Democrat, say they do not care about his politics. RAWSEP View, an example of red discontent in the midst of the blue state of California. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. In San Francisco, the Pacific Heights Tower, built in the 1920s, is not the sort of place where you would expect to find an acerbic conservative cryptocurrency executive with a fondness for President Trump and Elon Musk. Nonetheless, Jesse Powell wanted, and Powell, an early Bitcoin proponent and the founder of the cryptocurrency exchange Kraken, had his heart set on unit number 9. He said that he is not worried about living among people who clearly do not want him there. The seller is very intent on selling, and I am very much intent on buying. He said, I am not going to let a bunch of grumpy old people get in the way. 16 New York, a judge tried to get out of jury duty what he said cost him his job. Richard Snyder, a town justice in upstate New York, said he could not serve as an impartial grand juror because he believed anyone appearing before him was guilty. RAWSEP View, like Trump, this lay judge does not have a law degree. Perhaps like Trump, he cannot grasp legal concepts he has not been taught, such as the concept of innocent until proven guilty. Or perhaps he did not get a law degree because, among other things, such as the expense, time, and effort of obtaining a degree, he just does not like the very democratic and hopeful and sometimes arduous road he would need to follow to adhere to the concept of innocent until proven guilty as a judge in a court of law. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. When Richard Snyder was running to be a town justice in tiny Petersburg, New York in 2013, he told a local news site that he would be fair and honest on the bench because he was not a lawyer. He also said he was looking forward to learning about the law. He just learned something about it the hard way. Snyder, a Republican, was unopposed in that 2013 race and won it with 329 votes, but in December he resigned after a disciplinary panel found that he had tried to get out of grand jury duty by introducing himself as a town justice and saying he could not be impartial based on his opinion of those who appeared in his court. I know they are guilty, Snyder said in arguing to be excused. According to a court transcript, otherwise, he explained they would not be in front of me. The judge dismissed him and notified the disciplinary panel. There is no place on the bench for someone who so deeply misunderstands the role of a judge and the administration of justice. The administrator of the disciplinary panel, the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, said in a statement. Snyder, 68, earned around $6,000 a year to hear cases on the second and fourth Tuesday each month. His term was scheduled to end this year on December 31st, 2025. New York is among a number of states that allow so-called lay justices like Snyder to decide minor cases under a system that dates to the colonial era in America when lawyers were not as ubiquitous as they are today. In 2019, according to the Judicial Commission, only about 700 of roughly 1830 town and village judges in New York had attended law school before running for town justice. Snyder was a member of the town board in Petersburg, a community with just under 1,400 residents near the Vermont and Massachusetts borders, about 30 miles east of Albany. He has lived in the town his whole life and is a longtime volunteer firefighter there. He graduated from high school and did not attend college. His resume includes 34 years at a company in Bennington, Vermont, where he worked in quality control on carbon fiber tables used in X-ray machines. Before that, he worked at a sawmill and a grocery store. He retired in 2016. Snyder insisted several times that he understood that all people were innocent until proved guilty, but he also made comments that indicated an imperfect grasp of the concept and reiterated the belief that had gotten him into trouble in the first place. I know they are guilty because they did something wrong, he said at one point. That is how they got a ticket. The Petersburg town supervisor said in an interview that Snyder had informed him in December that he would be resigning at the end of the month for personal reasons, and that he had only learned of the disciplinary action when the commission announced it this week. He will now interview potential replacements to complete the remainder of his term. Would he ask candidates their views on what it means for a judge to be impartial? The Petersburg town supervisor said it is a reasonable question. 17 Pennsylvania 100000 eggs are stolen in Pennsylvania amid shortage. The theft of the eggs, which the authorities said were worth $40,000, comes as grocery shoppers across the country are facing empty shelves and higher prices for eggs. RAWSEP View. There is the problem of the cost of eggs. There is also the problem of the reason for the scarcity of eggs because of bird flu culling of hen flocks. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. New York Times, February 5, 2025. The Pennsylvania State Police said this week that they were investigating the theft on Saturday of 100,000 organic eggs worth more than $40,000 from a distribution trailer in Greencastle in south-central Pennsylvania. The eggs were stolen at around 8:40 p.m. from an organic facility. The thieves could sell them or even use them for vandalizing purposes. We do not know what purpose of stealing 100,000 would be for at this time with the extreme increased price of eggs. The only thing similar I have encountered during my career, she added, was a stolen trailer full of tainted chickens. The rising cost of eggs was a talking point in the presidential campaign. Suppliers are warning about the impact of avian influenza bird flu on availability and prices this week. Waffle House introduced a 50-cent surcharge on every egg it serves. The chain says it serves more than 272 million eggs a year in Pennsylvania. The trail has gone quiet since the nighttime raid, but at a time when shoppers across the country are facing empty shelves and higher prices when shopping for eggs, the theft has drawn outsized attention to what would ordinarily be seen as a local event. Thieves poached the eggs from a truck, leaving the organic facility shell. Shocked Pennsylvania police scramble to crack case. The investigation could take some hard-boiled detective work. 18 Wyoming. Why coal has been so hard to quit in the U.S. What the economics of coal-rich states like Wyoming tells us about the transition away from the dirtiest fossil fuel. RAWSEP View. The point of making videos for Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is to further the progress towards stopping the unnecessary use of indoor residential wood burning for home heating. There is a slightly better alternative to wood burning, which is coal burning. Wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5. And CO2 is coal burning, but neither solid fuel burning should continue for the sake of human health and for the sake of slowing climate change. The specious arguments for continuing coal burning may be similar to the specious arguments for continuing wood burning. The editor of RAWSEP attempts to point out similarities and differences shown in this following article. The arguments made for carbon capture are not scientifically valid. Carbon capture does not work, or works so badly that the expense of attempting it makes no sense. Just do not burn coal to begin with. The argument is made that coal is hard to replace. Coal is hard to replace because laws are passed in places like Wyoming that make it difficult to close coal plants, and Wyoming passed a law to sue other states if they have opted out of using Wyoming coal. Making laws establishing carbon capture standards implies that carbon capture is successful when it never has been, and implies that carbon capture should be enshrined in law when the common sense action would be to just stop burning coal and just start using the renewable energy alternatives that are cheaper today in 2025, like wind and solar and geothermal energy. The cleanest alternative to indoor residential wood burning is heat pumps that work down to 40 degrees below zero. Double as air conditioners have no air polluting emissions, run on electricity which is available on a smart electric grid increasingly built to all rural areas, and are cheap if heat pump rebates based on a sliding income scale and available in many United States in 2025 are used are like, but on a larger scale, the cheaper clean alternatives to coal burning of wind, solar, and geothermal energy generation. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. In the United States, coal is a terminal case while it once dominated the power grid of the nation. Hundreds of units have shuttered over the last 2 decades and have been largely replaced by natural gas and renewables like solar and wind. More than half of the remaining coal units in the United States are slated for retirement, but since 2017 utilities have extended the life of nearly a third of coal units with planned retirement dates either through delays or by reversing course and removing retirement goals entirely. Though coal provides only about 16% of U.S. electricity, it still wields tremendous economic power in several states that is not easy to replace. Wyoming is the largest coal-producing state and mines 2/5 of the coal in the U.S. In 2023, 71% of Wyoming electricity came from coal, down from 97% 20 years ago. Wyoming is dependent on fossil revenue to fund infrastructure, schools, and local government. In 2019, Wyoming was the first state to pass a law that made it more difficult to close coal plants. Other coal states like North Dakota, Kentucky, and West Virginia followed suit. Since then, the Wyoming state legislature has created a $12 million fund for the governor to sue other states if they opt out of Wyoming coal. It has not been used to date and established some of the first carbon capture standards in the nation. Coal production had more than halved in Wyoming over the last decade, largely to coal burning plant retirements in states east of Wyoming, where the Wyoming sells most of its coal. Wyoming burns less than 10% of what it produces. The state is now the third largest net energy supplier in the U.S. after oil giant Texas and gas giant Pennsylvania. At the same time, the Wyoming share of renewables has climbed. Most experts say coal is simply uneconomical. Every U.S. coal plant, except one, is more expensive to run than replacements based on renewables would be, according to a 2023 study that sole coal generator competitive with renewables was the Dry Fork Station, a smaller plant in Gillette, Wyoming. It opened in 2011 after spending roughly a quarter of the $13 billion it cost to build the plant on pollution control equipment. The power sector does not need coal, but coal needs the power sector. The Wyoming legislature plans to add carbon capture and sequestration technology to older plants in an effort to clean up the Wyoming coal stations. The Jim Bridger steam plant, the largest power plant in the state, could add the technology by 2030. But some energy experts say the technology is currently too costly to be realistic. Carbon capture is a ploy to preserve coal. Wyoming customers pay a surcharge on their monthly bills to study the feasibility of carbon capture. The Trump effect on coal. In January 2025, at the World Economic Forum annual gathering in Davos, Switzerland, President Trump said good clean coal could be used to fuel new power plants to meet the growing demand of artificial intelligence. Earlier in January 2025, Doug Burgum, the Trump pick to lead the Interior Department, endorsed clean coal to power AI that was critical to our national security. Most energy experts say clean coal, a term with no accepted definition, does not yet exist. Coal is the most carbon-intensive energy source, and the burning of fossil fuels like coal is the biggest contributor to climate change. The transition to cleaner forms of energy is well underway, even in states like Wyoming, where wind made up more than a fifth of the electricity generation in 2023 in the state, despite the growth of renewables and despite the long-term decline of coal. Some in the coal industry are optimistic that the shrinking margins of coal might shrink a little slower under Trump. In other related news, on the negative side, for continued air pollution, the Army Corps of Engineers has paused all permitting for well over 100 actions related to renewable energy projects across the country. On the positive side, for continued efforts to fight air pollution despite the Trump efforts to roll back the climate initiatives of the Biden administration, tax credit for electric vehicles is up and running. 19 Greenland and Switzerland. In Greenland, the ice does not just flow, it quivers and quakes by using a fiber optic cable to detect tiny vibrations a mile below the surface. Scientists discovered a surprising way that ice sheets move. RAWSEP View. This discovery helps explain why sea levels are rising, which is a byproduct of climate change. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. When Andreas Fichtner unspooled a fiber optic cable into a deep hole in the ice of Greenland, he was not expecting to discover a whole new way that glaciers move. What they found raises questions about the assumptions of scientists about how the ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica are moving and adding to sea levels worldwide. These quakes seem to start near impurities in the ice that were deposited by volcanic eruptions. Where these particles sit, the ice is weaker, more prone to cracking. Along these cracks, the ice sticks and slips and quivers as it moves, creating tiny seismic disturbances. Typically, scientists think of this ice as flowing like syrup, slowly, smoothly, fluidly. The new findings could someday help scientists better understand the way ice sheets break apart at their edges. Pre-existing flaws or damage in the ice can cause it to crack up rapidly once it flows off the land and out to sea. 20 European Union. The European Trump playbook offer carrots but warn that you have a big stick. The so-called Trump task force of the European Union spent 2024 preparing for a possible trade dispute. Specifics are secret, but guiding principles are becoming clear. RAWSEP View. Some of the strategies for EU response to possible Trump tariffs are to target United States Republican states in retaliatory tariffs. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 7, 2025. The European Union spent last year drawing up secret plans for what the bloc would do if President Trump made good on his threats of imposing higher tariffs on European goods and services. Now, as those threats go from hypothetical to potentially imminent, its plans are coming into broad focus. Hit specific, politically sensitive sectors like products made in Republican states with targeted tariffs meant to inflict maximum pain. Do not escalate. If it is avoidable, do move quickly and decisively, potentially using new tactics that could hit service providers like big Silicon Valley technology firms. It is a rough playbook that Europe would prefer not to use. The first goal is to avoid a trade war by offering to negotiate and dangling carrots, including more European purchases of American gas, which Trump has been pushing for EU officials. have warned that a trade war between the bloc and the United States would be a self-defeating disaster that would cost both sides and benefit geopolitical rivals like China and Russia. If appeasement fails, Europe is broadcasting that it is ready to hit back. We are prepared, the president of the European Commission said during a news conference this week in Brussels when asked whether she was ready to fend off tariff increases from the new U.S. administration. The bloc has 27 member countries. Several guiding principles are increasingly clear. In 2018, for instance, Europe reacted to steel and aluminum tariffs by hitting American whiskey with a large tariff, which hurt the bourbon industry of Kentucky, and thus a constituency critical to Mitch McConnell, a Kentucky Republican who was then the Senate Majority Leader. A second idea is to stagger the response, kicking in or ratcheting up retaliation only if certain triggers are met or dates past. The third is that responses would not necessarily be equally retaliatory. If Trump orders a 20% across the board tariff on Europe, that does not mean that Europe must respond with a 20% across-the-board tariff on the United States. The EU still wants to abide by global trade rules upheld by the World Trade Organization, which could suggest a more surgical approach. One option on the table is to rapidly target large American service providers like big technology companies with tariffs in force since 2023. The tool allows the EU to use higher customs duties or import limits when another country harms European industry. The Commission could use the tool to hit large Silicon Valley technology companies in response to American tariffs. The ultimate goal of Europe is not to inflame an all-out trade war. Also, EU leaders have at times struggled to get Washington on the phone. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has been invited to meet with foreign ministers, but has not done so. Ms. von der Leyen has not met with Trump since the inauguration in January. Trump has repeatedly said he wants Europe to buy more American cars and farm products. In addition to gas, officials are already trying to find a way to diversify their energy sources as the continent weans itself off Russian gas. We still get a lot of LNG from Russia, and why not replace it by American LNG? Ms. von der Leyen said in the days after Trump was elected, referring to liquefied natural gas. Above all, European leaders have been trying to remind America of how important the relationship between the EU and the United States is, both economically and for global peace. Not only is the EU, when treated as a bloc, the most important trading partner of America, it is also a major importer of American services, and as officials have repeatedly emphasized in recent days, European companies employ millions of Americans. But we will always protect our own interest, however, and whenever that is needed. 21 Israel, the Trump-Gaza deal, war crimes in exchange for beachfront property. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 7, 2025. A beach in the Gaza Strip the days following the ludicrous proposal of the president, his aides and allies in a familiar pattern tried to make it into something sane. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, for example, pretended that Trump had merely made a generous offer to help Gaza rebuild. Israel, however, understood the earth-shaking significance of the Trump words. The United States is not obviously going to build a Middle Eastern Riviera on the border of Israel. What it has done, however, is grant Israel extraordinary new license to crush Palestinians in Gaza and maybe in the West Bank as well. Maybe the Trump scheme for a new colony on the Mediterranean will come to nothing. Trump has created a de facto justification not only for Israeli expansionism but for Chinese and Russian expansionism as well. Saudi Arabia. Trump met PGA Tour commissioner about Saudi Golf League deal. Tour officials said the session at the White House brought us closer to a final deal that would be subject to Justice Department antitrust scrutiny. RAWSEP View. Perhaps Trump is envisioning LIV golf events in a Gaza that has been remade by a Riviera-style real estate deal. According to Wikipedia, LIV Golf is a professional men's golf tour. The name LIV refers to the Roman numerals for 54, the number of holes played at LIV events. The first LIV Golf Invitational Series event started on June 9, 2022 at the Centurion Club near St. Albans in Hertfordshire, UK. The Invitational Series became the LIV Golf League in 2023. LIV Golf is financed by the Public Investment Fund, the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia. Some journalists and commentators have said the tour is part of efforts by the Saudi monarchy, which has been criticized for its corruption and human rights abuses, to improve its public image through sports. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. President Trump met this week with the PGA Tour commissioner. The tour said on Thursday as the Justice Department considers whether to approve a venture between the United States' premier golf circuit and one backed by the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia. Trump hosted Adam Scott, who won the Masters tournament in 2013 and sits on the PGA Tour board. During the Oval Office meeting, Trump also spoke by telephone with the wealth fund governor of Saudi Arabia and one of the most influential figures in Saudi Arabia since LIV thundered onto the professional golf scene 3 years ago. Trump, stung by distancing itself from him after his entry into politics by the professional golf establishment, has been one of its most steadfast supporters and one of its most essential vendors. Trump has been a regular presence as he played in LIV professional amateur competitions. He would routinely denigrate the PGA Tour and praise its rival and its Saudi patrons. Now Trump is acting as something of a mediator for the American tour and the Saudi upstart that defied legions of naysayers to become a force in the sport. Trump also had a particular falling out with the PGA of America, which pulled its men's championship tournament from a Trump course after the January 6, 2021 riot at the Capitol. The Trump organization and the group, which is distinct from the PGA Tour, later reached a settlement.